Hey, it's week 1 of Walk Worthy. Here's your host, Prep. Walk Worthy is a 6-week series. It's going through Ephesians 1 through 3. So week 1 is in Ephesians chapter 1. When you get started, call your group together. Don't give any introduction. Just say, hey, here's the first question. Lay out that first question. And whenever I lay out the first question, I always like to say this. I say, everyone answers this first question, and it's just for fun. First question doesn't have anything to do with the lesson. When you ask each question, you want to be sure that you listen. So that means get on eye level with the people that you're talking to. If you can, arrange the chairs in a circle so that everybody can see everybody. You want to set up the room in a way that says this is going to be a conversation, not a lecture. So be sure you listen to your people as they give answers. Whenever you answer these questions, remember your answer sets the tone. You ask the first question and you answer it, you'll tell people without telling them, this is how long you have to answer the question. You'll also tell people this is how transparent you can be in this group. So think about that and set the tone with the length of your answer and also with the transparency of your answer. By the length, I mean if you take 5 minutes to answer the first question, everybody's going to expect that they'll have 5 minutes too to answer the first question. That's one of the reasons I like to write my own answers out ahead of time so that I don't ramble on. Hey, I already said this first one, sit in a circle at eye level. I try to avoid a desk or a podium. I try to have nothing in front of me that says, here, I'm here to lecture you, preach to you, talk to you. I want to always tell people we're here for a collaborative learning experience. I always like to pass this around every meeting, just a piece of paper that has the date at the top and then has a place for name, phone number, and email. I tell people, hey, if you think I might not have your phone number or your email, I'd love for you to write it on there so I can get in touch with you during the week if we ever have any changes to our schedule. And sometimes I like to send out reminders a day or two before our meeting just to see who's coming. So, talking about the lesson itself, it's in Ephesians chapter 1, verses 1 through 14. When you get to this third section, the introduce the passage section, just read that out loud. It's usually only a couple of sentences. Sometimes it's more than that. But just say, the main point today is this. Christians have been given every spiritual blessing in Christ. And that's what Paul praised God for as he began his letter to the Christians in Ephesus. So you'll move right into the study question and say, let's read Ephesians chapter 1, verses 1 through 14 together. And let's answer this question. What spiritual blessings do we have in Christ? So whenever you read through that passage, you can break it up into groups the way this instructs you to. You know, somebody read verses 1 through 6, somebody else read verses 7 through 10. And as you go through, list. You might write them down even on a sheet of paper. You might write them on a board if you have a whiteboard or something like that. List people's answers to that question. What spiritual blessings do we have in Christ? Now the fifth element, this question, the connect the dots, it asks, based on what you know about Paul's story, which of these blessings do you think he felt most thankful for? So it might help you to review Paul's story ahead of time. When you're answering this question, you could think about Acts chapter 9, verses 1 through 31. That's the original story of Paul's conversion. Then Paul retells his testimony in Acts chapter 26, verses 1 through 23. Again in Galatians chapter 1, verses 11 through 24. And then again in Philippians chapter 3, verses 4 through 11. So that'll give you a little bit of background on Paul's story to refresh your memory. I'll hold these up so you can read them. If you need to pause the video while you look at these and write them down, you're welcome to. One thing that will come up possibly in answer to one of the questions or more of the questions today is the word predestined. In verse 5 and verse 11, Paul says, God predestined us. He says that in 5 and 11. A few things to observe about that. One, it's considered an act of love. Verse 4 says, he, in love, predestined us. It's also considered an act of grace. You can see that in verse 6. And again in verse 6, you can see God predestining us is a praiseworthy act. And you say, well, what did he predestine us for? Verse 5 answers that. He predestined us for adoption as sons. Why did he predestine us? Well, if you look for an answer to that question in these verses, you'll see in verse 5 and verse 11, it was according to the purpose of his will, which kind of feels like maybe it's not a full answer. You might want to also look to Ephesians 8:29, where Paul says, those whom he foreknew, he also predestined. Now, traditionally, Christians have answered this question in two ways. So if the question is, on what basis did God predestine us for adoption? One traditional answer would be, it was on the basis of his foreknowledge of who actually would respond to the gospel in faith. I'm going to say that again because you might need to think about it. One answer to the question is that God predestined us according to his foreknowledge of who actually would, in the future, respond to the gospel by faith. And then another traditional answer would be, no, it's not that. His foreknowledge is actually God's decision-making process in the past. So it's on the basis of nothing other than his sovereign will. Now, traditionally, Baptists have not taken an official stance. Southern Baptists have not taken an official stance on which of those answers is the biblical or correct answer. And our church traditionally has not taken an official stance on that question. So you may have people in your group that are on one side or on the other side of that. You don't have to sort all that out in your lesson today. It's okay just to focus on the idea that his predestination of us was an act of love, regardless of what his decision was based on. It was an act of love, it was an act of grace, and it's a praiseworthy act. So if you do have somebody in your group that feels really concerned about that, you can certainly direct them to other things to study. You can direct them to somebody that has some formal theological training. You could point them to a systematic theology book. Or you could say, hey, why don't you study this? And you could come back next week and give us a report on it. By all means, encourage people to study the Bible and look for answers to questions like this. Don't be afraid to search the Bible for answers. But also don't feel like you have to make that the main issue. It's one of the issues in today's Bible study, but it's not the only issue that should come up in today's Bible study. So address it as you need to. Hopefully this will help. If you need further help with that, I'm here. I'm ready to help you with that. So be in touch. Praying for you. Hope it's a great experience. Hope week 1 of Walk Worthy goes well. Here's one last bonus for you. Some of you might say, walk worthy. That's not correct grammar. And you might say, correct grammar. I'm not sure that's correct grammar either. Worthy here, I think it's called a flat adjective. I looked it up on webstersdictionary.com or something like that. And they called it a flat adjective. Maybe it was a flat adverb. I don't remember. I'm not a grammarian, but I did just double check to make sure it's okay. It's like when we say run fast. You don't correct me and say, you should say run quickly, right? You don't have to correct me when I say walk worthy either. In fact, you can look at some translations of Ephesians chapter 3, verse 1. No, Ephesians chapter 4, verse 1. And you'll find worthy there used as an adverb. So don't stress about it. You can just tell any grammar Nazis in your class or in your group, it's okay. It's correct grammar. So that's it. Hope your week goes great. Praying for your group.